I knew I was done the moment my boss said my name in that tone, the slow, patronizing drawl people use right before they hand you an insult dressed as career guidance. We were sitting in his glass-walled office, overlooking the floor I practically ran for the last 3 years, when he folded his hands and said, "You're valuable, but you're not quite ready for promotion." The words hit me like a punch to the ribs, not because they were harsh, but because they were a lie. I'd been doing the job above my title for months. I'd led the department through 2 chaotic transitions, onboarded every new hire, fixed problems he created, and carried the team through a merger that nearly broke everyone else. I didn't expect a parade. I expected fairness. But when he said it, he didn't even look apologetic. He looked smug, like he expected me to thank him for the feedback. That's when something in me clicked. If he couldn't see my worth, someone else would. And if he wanted to keep me small, he was about to learn how expensive that mistake would be. He went on with a speech that sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced it in the mirror. According to him, I lacked initiative, which was rich coming from a man who once asked me how to convert a PDF. He said I needed more exposure to leadership tasks, even though I was already the one handling his meetings, calming clients he upset, and mediating internal conflicts because he refused to. My favorite part was when he told me I needed to show more ownership, moments after handing me 3 new responsibilities with no raise and no credit. He said all this with a straight face, flipping through his notes like he was reading from a script titled "Why You Should Settle for Less." I let him finish. I nodded. I asked the polite questions. I smiled the way corporate culture expects, tight, professional, controlled. But mentally, I was already gone. I had been loyal. I had been patient. But I was done being undervalued. And nothing motivates a resignation letter like the moment you realize your boss thinks you'll never walk away. That night, I updated my resume, not out of desperation but clarity. I listed every major initiative I spearheaded, many of which had his name on them despite me doing the work. I called 3 clients I trusted and asked if they'd be open to being references. 2 of them said, "I wish we could hire you ourselves." That told me everything I needed to know. Within a week, I had 2 interviews lined up and 1 informal offer from a director I'd worked with during the merger. He didn't even want to wait for HR. He told me, "If you ever want to jump ship, call me first." It was funny, outside that building, everyone saw my value immediately. Inside, I was just the person who kept everything running so others could take credit. So on Friday morning, I walked into the office with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. While my boss was preparing for our development follow-up meeting, I was preparing something else. When I walked into his office at 9 a.m., he gave me that same paternal smile, like he expected me to thank him for his guidance or present some contrived action plan to prove how coachable I was. Instead, I placed a sealed envelope on his desk. He blinked, confused, then opened it slowly. His face went pale the moment he saw the first sentence. "This letter serves as my formal notice of resignation." He read it twice, then looked up at me with the expression of a man who just realized he lost something he assumed he owned. He stammered, searching for the right words, but I didn't give him the chance. I told him, calmly and professionally, that I had accepted an offer for a role 2 levels above the one he denied me. A role with better pay, better leadership, and, most importantly, people who recognized my work. He tried to backpedal. He told me we could revisit the promotion conversation. He insisted he didn't mean I wasn't capable. He tried to rewrite the entire meeting from the week before, as if I had imagined it. But the decision wasn't up for negotiation. I'd given this place everything. And they tried to keep me in a box I had long outgrown. The fallout was immediate. By the end of the day, 2 team members asked if I could take them with me. 3 clients emailed asking who their main contact would be now that I was leaving. My departure created the kind of panic my boss never expected, because he had built the department on the assumption that I would always be there to hold it together. Suddenly he had to face the reality he'd ignored. I wasn't not ready for a promotion. I had outgrown the entire role, and the manager who kept blocking me. On my last day, he tried one more guilt trip, telling me the timing was inconvenient and that the team would struggle without stability. I simply smiled. For years, he treated me as replaceable. Now he was realizing I wasn't. If he had promoted me when I earned it, he would have a strong second in command today. Instead, he has a resignation letter pinned to his bulletin board as a reminder that loyalty is a two-way street. And the best part? 2 months after I left, I heard through the grapevine that he was forced to take on my workload himself, because no one else applied for the job. Turns out the role wasn't too big for me. It was too big for him to fill. I didn't plan on checking back in, but the universe has a funny way of delivering updates right when they hit hardest. About 6 weeks after I left, I got a LinkedIn message from one of my old teammates, a short, chaotic paragraph that started with "You will not believe what happened today." Apparently, the department was in full meltdown. Without me handling the client escalations, the weekly reporting, the system updates, and the cross-team coordination, everything had slowed to a crawl. Deadlines slipped. Clients complained loudly. A few even threatened to pull their contracts because my boss had stepped in to manage things personally, which mostly meant confusing people then disappearing. It turned out my lack of readiness for promotion wasn't the problem. His lack of leadership was. But the real twist came when HR launched a quiet internal review to figure out why turnover had suddenly skyrocketed. 3 people resigned in my absence, 2 filed internal complaints, and 1 submitted a 20-page exit interview detailing how the department was being mismanaged. And in every single one of those documents, my name came up, not in blame, but in contrast. They all said the same thing in different ways: things worked when she was here. She carried the team. We lost the wrong person. I didn't need to hear it to feel validated, but I won't pretend it didn't hit me with a warm, satisfying clarity. The truth always surfaces, even in corporate environments where politics often bury it. My favorite update, though, the one that made me actually laugh, came from a client during a networking event. He pulled me aside and said, "Your old boss tried to pitch us a new workflow, but he didn't understand half the terminology. We miss having someone competent." He grinned at me. You should have seen his face when we asked where you went. I don't think he realized you leaving meant your professionalism went with you. That hit different. Not because I wanted him to fail, but because I had spent years believing I couldn't grow unless he allowed it. Turns out, he was the only one who believed that. Meanwhile, at my new company, things were the polar opposite. The director who'd hired me didn't just recognize my value, he used it. Within a month, I was leading my own team. Within 2, I had a clear development plan and the authority to make decisions without begging for approval. The office atmosphere was lighter, sharper, and more aligned with what I'd wanted all along, a place where competence mattered more than politics and growth wasn't treated like a privilege you had to earn by staying silent. My work finally felt like it had purpose instead of being a way to cover for someone else's shortcomings. But the moment that truly sealed everything happened on a random Thursday afternoon. I got an email, short, clipped, almost desperate, from my former boss. He asked if I would consider coming back temporarily to help with the transition, and he dangled the promotion I'd fought for as bait. The one he said I wasn't ready for. The one he used to keep me small. I read it once, closed it, and let out a laugh that came from somewhere deep. Because this wasn't just karma. It was proof. Proof that leaving wasn't impulsive. Proof that I had been right about my worth. Proof that the promotion was never about readiness, it was about control. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Silence can be its own revenge, especially in a world where people like him think they always have the upper hand. I had already moved on. I had already leveled up. And he was left dealing with the consequences of pushing away the one person he couldn't replace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't confrontation. It's a resignation letter. And a better offer waiting on the other side. By the time the next ripple of news reached me, the story had evolved from office gossip to something closer to poetic justice. Another former coworker messaged me one night with a simple line. He finally admitted it. I didn't know what that meant until she sent a voice note, her whispering excitedly from a bathroom stall, telling me that my boss had confessed in a leadership meeting that he had misjudged my readiness and allowed personal bias to influence a professional decision. Translation: he realized he screwed up. And now everyone else knew it too. The HR manager apparently asked, point blank, why he had denied my promotion for reasons that contradicted my documented achievements. When he tried to dodge the question, another department head, someone who had worked with me directly, cut in and said, she kept this entire division stable. If anything, we should have promoted her faster. According to the whispers, the room went quiet in the way only corporate rooms do when someone tells the truth no one wanted to say first. And the best part? The company had been forced to bring in a consulting agency to restore processes I had built from scratch. They were paying tens of thousands for work I used to do for free, while being told I wasn't ready. That's when people started quitting in clusters, and upper management finally connected the dots. I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I had been the only person who knew how the machine worked. Meanwhile, my new role was turning into something bigger. The director who hired me pulled me aside after a presentation and said, I'm recommending you for a fast-track leadership program. You've earned it. No hesitation. No conditions. No nonsense performance review filled with manipulated talking points. Just recognition, clean, immediate, undeserved. It felt surreal, moving from a place that thrived on holding people back to one that pushed people forward the moment they showed capability. Suddenly I wasn't drowning. I was sprinting. Leading teams. Designing systems. Making decisions that actually shaped the company instead of patching up someone else's mistakes. And every time I did something with ease that my old boss used to struggle through, I felt a quiet, steady vindication. But the true final blow came months later at an industry conference. My ex-boss was there, standing by a booth, trying to impress people who didn't look remotely interested. He spotted me before I could pretend I didn't see him. His face shifted through 4 emotions in 3 seconds: surprise, discomfort, embarrassment, and finally, something like regret. He gave me a stiff nod, the kind you give someone who now outranks you in every way that matters. I just smiled politely and kept walking. Not because I was petty. Because I genuinely didn't need anything from him anymore, not an apology, not acknowledgement, nothing. He had once held my career in his hands and used that power to keep me contained. Now I walked past him with a badge that listed a title he said I wasn't ready for, at a company that saw my value the moment I walked in. And that's when it hit me fully: he didn't lose me because I left. He lost me because he couldn't see me. Sometimes revenge is loud, explosive, dramatic. But sometimes, it's simply living the life someone else tried to convince you didn't deserve, and letting them watch from the sidelines as you rise without them. That's the kind of victory that lasts. A few months later, the final chapter of this whole saga wrote itself, quietly, effortlessly, and with a level of poetic symmetry I couldn't have scripted better if I tried. It started with a phone call from a recruiter. Not unusual, but the tone in her voice was amused. I have a question, she said. Did you used to work under a manager named Daniel? I nearly choked. Yes. She exhaled and said, yeah, he applied for a position here. You're listed as someone who managed key projects during his tenure. Would you be open to confirming that? I didn't throw him under the bus. I didn't need to. I just answered every question truthfully and professionally. Who led what? Who maintained what? Who stabilized what? By the time the recruiter finished taking notes, she already knew the truth. The person who kept that department alive wasn't the one applying for the job. And the next day, she emailed me to confirm what I suspected. They moved forward with another candidate. Corporate karma, delivered with perfect neutrality. But the real finale came shortly after, when our paths crossed one last time, this time not at an industry event or through back-channel whispers. I was invited to speak on a leadership panel about retaining top performers. The irony wasn't lost on me. The room was filled with executives from companies across the region. As I stepped on stage, I saw him in the audience. Not up front. Not among the leaders. Near the back, sitting small in a chair that suddenly seemed too big for him. I took my seat on the panel, adjusted the microphone, and answered a question about why companies lose good people. My response wasn't rehearsed. It came from somewhere deeper. People don't leave companies, I said. They leave managers who mistake loyalty for compliance and confuse silence for lack of ambition. The most expensive mistake any leader can make is assuming someone isn't ready simply because it's convenient to believe it. The room went quiet. Not tense. Not awkward. Just still, with the kind of stillness that tells you every single person knows exactly what you mean. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. He heard every word. And he knew. After the panel ended, a small group gathered around me, directors, VPs, even a CEO, asking about strategies, complimenting the clarity, taking notes. They valued my insight. They valued me. It felt worlds away from the cramped office where someone once told me I wasn't ready while simultaneously relying on me to keep everything from falling apart. When I finally walked out of the building, the air felt lighter. Cleaner. I wasn't carrying anything from the past anymore, not anger, not resentment, not the need to prove anything. I had already proven it, not through revenge but through growth. And as I crossed the street, I glanced back just once. I saw him standing outside the building, watching me leave with the same expression he had the day I handed in my notice, a mixture of realization and regret. The difference now? It wasn't my problem anymore. He stayed where he chose to stay. I rose where I chose to rise. Some stories end with an explosion. This one ended with a truth he couldn't escape. When you underestimate the person holding you together, you don't just lose them. You lose everything they carried. And just when I thought the story had fully closed, life handed me one final, unexpected epilogue, the kind that doesn't feel like revenge, but rather a reminder of why walking away was the smartest thing I ever did. It happened during a quarterly strategy summit hosted by my new company. I had been promoted, again, this time to a role that not only recognized my abilities but gave me a seat at the table where real decisions were made. The kind of position my old boss always hinted I might grow into someday, while quietly keeping me doing the work without the authority. Now I was the one leading discussions, approving budgets, and mentoring teams that genuinely wanted to learn, not teams held together by fear of disappointing someone incompetent. The summit included several partner organizations, and as I walked into the networking hall, I noticed a group gathered around a tech demonstration booth. I didn't think much of it until someone stepped aside, and there he was. My old boss. Standing behind a small table with a cheap vinyl banner, dressed in a suit that didn't quite fit, giving a pitch that sounded memorized and brittle. He wasn't running a department anymore. He wasn't managing a team. He wasn't even with a major company. He was working for a mid-tier vendor trying to secure contracts with firms like mine. And he saw me. His voice faltered mid-sentence. The executive he'd been speaking to turned around and recognized me immediately. "Hey, you're the person running the new transformation initiative, right?" He shook my hand enthusiastically. Are you the one evaluating software partnerships? If so, we definitely want your input. My old boss stood there frozen, like someone had unplugged his operating system. The roles had flipped. Completely. I was the decision maker. He was the salesman hoping for approval. He tried to gather himself, offering me a stiff smile. It's been a while, he said, voice shaky. Maybe we can reconnect? Talk about how we might work together again? But this time, I didn't feel anger. No bitterness. Just clarity. I returned the smile, polite and professional. I'll review the proposals, I said, based on the quality of the product. He nodded too fast, trying to hide the panic in his eyes. He knew what that meant. There would be no favoritism. No second chances. No leveraging past proximity. He would be judged on the very thing he always avoided, actual performance. Later, one of my colleagues pulled me aside. Does he really think he's getting a contract? She asked, laughing under her breath. His product isn't even close to competitive. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. He had built his career on underestimating the wrong people. I built mine on becoming indispensable. And now the entire playing field reflected that difference. When the summit ended, I walked out into the cool evening air, feeling something I hadn't expected, gratitude. Not for him, but for the timing. The lesson. The push that forced me to leave a place that never deserved me. If he had promoted me back then, I might still be stuck in that stagnant little department, working 3 jobs for 1 paycheck. His refusal had been my liberation. Some people think revenge is about watching someone fail. But the real revenge, the lasting kind, is living a life they never believed you were capable of. Not to spite them, but to prove that their small vision never defined your future. He shrank. I grew. In the moment he realized it, that was the true ending. In the end, everything settled into a kind of balance I didn't expect, one where the past no longer stung, and the future no longer felt like something I had to fight for. I didn't think about him anymore, not really. He had become a footnote in a story that started with frustration but ended with clarity. The truth was simple, I didn't succeed because he held me back. I succeeded because I walked away. And that's what stayed with me long after the promotions, the panels, the industry events, and that awkward summit encounter faded into memory. Growth isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving yourself right, choosing yourself even when someone else doesn't. Especially when someone else doesn't. Looking back, his biggest mistake wasn't denying me a promotion. It wasn't the patronizing feedback, or the assumptions, or the dismissive comments. It was thinking I wouldn't leave. Thinking I didn't know my worth. Thinking I needed his permission to rise. I didn't. I never did. Walking away didn't just change my career. It changed my entire trajectory. I ended up in rooms I never imagined, leading teams that valued me, building things that mattered, and setting a standard for myself that no mediocre manager could ever shrink again. And him? He became the cautionary tale people whisper about when they talk about retention, leadership, and the cost of underestimating the wrong person. Some stories end with fireworks. Mine ended with freedom. And that's the best revenge anyone can ask for.